Over 60, the body does not collapse suddenly. It whispers first, through patterns we repeat without noticing. And one of the quietest, most dangerous patterns begins every single morning before we even leave the bed. The habit of staying still too long after waking, letting the body remain in a low-flow, low-movement state while blood thickens, vessels tighten, and the brain waits for circulation that never fully arrives. What feels like harmless rest is often silent stagnation, and in the aging body, stagnation is not neutral. Morning stillness is often mistaken for recovery, a soft pause before the day begins. But in the aging body it is something far more complex and far more dangerous, because the systems that keep us alive are not designed for prolonged quiet after sleep, they are designed for circulation, motion, and rhythm. And when we remain motionless in bed or seated for long stretches after waking, the blood that should be flowing freely begins to slow, thickening slightly as fluid shifts and platelets become more likely to cling together, creating a subtle internal environment that favors stagnation rather than renewal. And this shift is not dramatic or painful, it is silent, occurring beneath the surface of awareness, where the heart continues to beat but without the mechanical assistance that active muscles normally provide, leaving blood to pool in the lower body while the brain receives less oxygen-rich flow than it needs to fully awaken. Over time, this repeated pattern becomes a form of biological training, teaching the nervous and vascular systems that slow mornings are the new baseline, and the body adapts by conserving energy, tightening vessels, and reducing responsiveness, not because it is failing, but because it is responding logically to the signals it receives, and the most powerful signal of all is stillness, which tells the heart to work less, the arteries to remain rigid, and the blood to move more reluctantly through the narrow pathways that feed the brain, gradually increasing internal pressure and inflammatory stress along vessel walls that are already fragile with age. As this habit repeats day after day, the blood's chemistry shifts in small but meaningful ways, becoming more viscous, more prone to clotting, and less efficient at delivering oxygen, while the inner lining of the vessels, which depends on steady flow to remain healthy, begins to lose its protective function, allowing microscopic damage to accumulate. And although no single morning creates a crisis, the cumulative effect quietly raises the probability that a clot will eventually lodge in a cerebral artery or that a weakened vessel will rupture under pressure. What makes this especially dangerous is how natural it feels, how easily it blends into daily life, wrapped in comfort and routine, so that the body's warning signs remain unnoticed, and the mind interprets stillness as peace, not realizing that beneath this calm surface, circulation is slowing, oxygen is decreasing, and the brain is entering a state of low-grade stress that it cannot consciously communicate, yet continuously records at a cellular level. The body is not designed to awaken slowly into immobility, it is designed to transition from rest into flow, from quiet into gentle motion, and when that transition is delayed, the entire system hesitates, creating a fragile internal balance that favors. The aging circulatory system does not weaken because it is old, it weakens because it is underused, and when early movement is missing from the day, the vessels that once expanded easily begin to lose their natural flexibility, not suddenly, but gradually, through a slow biological adaptation that responds to the signals it receives, and stillness is the strongest signal of all, telling the arteries that less flow is required and telling the heart that less effort is necessary, so the system adjusts downward, conserving energy in a way that feels comfortable but quietly undermines resilience. Blood vessels are living tissue, not rigid pipes, and they depend on gentle pressure changes created by movement to stay elastic, because each step, each stretch, and each shift in posture causes the vessel walls to expand and contract, training them to remain responsive. And when this rhythmic stimulation disappears, the walls begin to stiffen, narrowing the passageways that deliver oxygen and nutrients to the brain, the heart, and every organ, increasing resistance and forcing the heart to push harder to achieve the same result, which over time accelerates wear across the entire cardiovascular network. Without early movement, gravity begins to dominate circulation, pulling blood downward into the legs and lower body while reducing venous return to the heart, creating a quiet imbalance that lowers cardiac output and reduces cerebral blood flow at a time when the brain is transitioning from sleep into activity. And this reduced flow is not dramatic, but it is enough to trigger stress responses within the vascular lining, encouraging inflammation and impairing the release of substances that normally keep vessels relaxed and smooth. As this pattern repeats, the chemistry inside the blood changes in response to slower circulation, becoming more concentrated and less efficient at delivering oxygen, while metabolic byproducts linger longer in tissues, increasing oxidative stress and contributing to the gradual erosion of vascular health. And because these changes happen incrementally, they are easily overlooked, allowing structural damage to accumulate beneath the surface of normal daily life. Movement in the early hours is not exercise in the conventional sense, it is a biological requirement, a signal to the circulatory system that the day has begun and that blood must move, vessels must adapt, and the heart must resume its dynamic role as a pump rather than a metronome, and without this signal, the body remains in a semi-resting state that is neither fully asleep nor fully awake, a limbo that increases vulnerability rather than restoring strength. Over months and years, this absence of early motion becomes embedded in the physiology, reshaping vessel behavior, altering blood flow patterns, and increasing the strain placed on delicate cerebral arteries, quietly preparing the conditions for stroke, heart disease, and cognitive decline, and reminding us that circulation thrives on rhythm, elasticity depends on use. Gentle exercise is often dismissed as too small to matter, yet within the human body it functions as a powerful biological reset, a signal that reawakens systems that have slowed during rest and reminds the vascular network how to move with ease and purpose, because when muscles begin to contract, even lightly, they compress veins and propel blood back toward the heart, restoring circulation that may have grown sluggish during the night, and as this flow increases, the inner lining of the blood vessels responds by releasing chemical messengers that relax the vessel walls, widen the channels, and allow oxygen-rich blood to reach the brain with greater efficiency. This shift is not merely mechanical, it is chemical and neurological, as the increase in circulation stimulates the production of nitric oxide, a molecule that acts like a natural vasodilator, reducing resistance and easing the workload of the heart, while also improving the flexibility of arteries that may have grown rigid with age. And this flexibility is essential, because stiff vessels cannot respond to changes in blood pressure, making them more vulnerable to rupture or blockage when stress occurs. As blood flow improves, glucose and oxygen reach neurons more effectively, supporting the brain's metabolic needs at a time when it is transitioning into alertness, and this improved delivery enhances clarity, balance, and coordination, not because the brain is being pushed, but because it is being nourished. And with repeated gentle movement each morning, the brain begins to associate waking with flow rather than stagnation, gradually reinforcing healthier circulation patterns that persist throughout the day. The lymphatic system, often overlooked, also responds to gentle motion, using muscle contractions to clear metabolic waste and inflammatory byproducts that accumulate during rest, reducing internal congestion and creating a cleaner internal environment for cells to function. And as this waste is removed, the immune and vascular systems operate with greater efficiency, lowering the background level of inflammation that contributes to vessel damage and clot formation. What makes gentle exercise so effective is its accessibility, because it does not demand strain or intensity, only consistency, and in this consistency the body finds a rhythm that restores rather than exhausts, teaching the heart, the vessels, and the nervous system to expect movement as a natural part of waking. And over time, this expectation reshapes physiology, increasing resilience and reducing vulnerability without the need for extreme effort. In this way, a slow walk, simple stretching, or mindful joint movement becomes more than a habit, it becomes a message to the body that life is active, that circulation is needed, and that the brain deserves a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients, reinforcing the idea that health is not built through force, but through gentle signals repeated daily, guiding the body back toward balance and flow. Repeated low-flow mornings do not announce themselves with pain or urgency, they unfold quietly, shaping the brain through subtle and cumulative changes that are easy to ignore yet powerful enough to alter its long-term resilience, because the brain is exquisitely sensitive to circulation, and even slight reductions in blood flow create microscopic stress within the smallest vessels that supply neurons with oxygen and glucose. And while these microdisruptions may not cause immediate symptoms, they leave behind tiny areas of cellular fatigue and structural strain that slowly accumulate like invisible scars. Each time circulation remains sluggish after waking, the delicate capillaries in the brain experience brief moments of oxygen shortage, triggering metabolic stress that forces neurons to adapt by conserving energy and reducing activity. And over time, This repeated adaptation reshapes neural networks, subtly impairing communication between regions responsible for memory, balance, and coordination, so that the effects are felt not as a single dramatic event, but as a gradual fading of sharpness and stability that feels like normal aging rather than a warning signal. The brain's vascular system is a tightly regulated environment, designed to adjust instantly to changes in demand, yet when low-flow conditions become routine, this responsiveness weakens, making it harder for vessels to dilate when the brain requires more oxygen, and this loss of flexibility increases vulnerability during moments of stress, when a sudden spike in blood pressure or a temporary blockage can overwhelm fragile pathways that no longer have the capacity to adapt. Inflammation quietly intensifies in these low-flow states, as stagnant blood encourages the buildup of metabolic byproducts that irritate vessel walls and disrupt the protective barrier that normally shields the brain from harmful substances, and as this barrier weakens, immune cells and inflammatory molecules gain access to neural tissue, amplifying damage and accelerating the erosion of cognitive and motor function. Over years, these microinjuries merge into broader patterns of vulnerability, thinning the margin of safety that separates healthy circulation from crisis, so that a clot that might once have been dissolved or rerouted instead becomes lodged, cutting off oxygen to critical brain regions and triggering the sudden cascade of a stroke. And what appears to be a spontaneous event is revealed as the final expression of countless mornings spent in biological quiet. This process reminds us that the brain is not only shaped by dramatic events, but by the rhythms we repeat in silence, and that low-flow habits, though comfortable and familiar, carry consequences that extend far beyond the moment, gradually redefining the limits of neurological resilience and underscoring the profound influence of daily circulation on the future of the mind. Stroke is often described as a sudden and unpredictable event, yet within the body it is rarely abrupt, because long before a vessel becomes blocked or ruptures, the internal environment has already been shaped by thousands of small, repeated choices that quietly program the nervous and circulatory systems toward either resilience or vulnerability, and each morning routine becomes a biological instruction, telling the body how much movement to expect, how much blood to circulate, and how responsive the vessels must remain, so that over time these instructions are no longer temporary signals but embedded patterns that guide the behavior of cells and tissues. The human body is deeply adaptive, and it does not judge habits as good or bad. It simply responds to them, adjusting structure and function to match what it experiences most often, and when stillness dominates the early hours, the cardiovascular system learns to operate at a lower level of demand, conserving energy in ways that seem harmless but gradually reduce flexibility, weaken vessel walls, and alter blood chemistry, increasing the likelihood that a clot will form or that pressure will exceed the tolerance of fragile arteries. These changes do not occur in isolation. They interact with metabolism, inflammation, and neural regulation, forming a network of adaptations that reinforce one another, so that slow circulation promotes insulin resistance increases vascular stress, and vascular stress further impairs circulation, creating a self-sustaining loop that steadily raises stroke risk without ever announcing itself through clear symptoms. The most powerful aspect of habit programming is its invisibility, because the body feels normal even as it changes, and the absence of pain is mistaken for the absence of danger, allowing patterns to persist for years, and as these patterns accumulate, they gradually narrow the margin of safety within the brain's blood supply, making it less capable of responding to sudden challenges such as dehydration, emotional stress, or temporary spikes in blood pressure. What ultimately manifests as stroke is therefore not a random catastrophe, but the final outcome of a long biological narrative written through routine, repetition, and adaptation. And when this is understood, the concept of prevention shifts from fear to awareness, from dramatic interventions to gentle daily choices that slowly reshape the internal landscape toward stability and flow. In this way, each morning becomes an opportunity to revise the story the body is telling itself, not through force or intensity, but through consistent signals of movement and engagement, reminding the circulatory system that it is needed, reminding the brain that oxygen and glucose must continue to arrive with ease, and reaffirming that health is not preserved through one decision, but through the quiet power of habits repeated across a lifetime.